But stablecoin and being an essential part of the payment integrations here in Hong Kong, I think that definitely validated. So that's why I'm saying like tech is no longer the pain point. It's all the other counterparties that the project needs to find and validate and start building the relationships with.
Technology is there. Yes, structure and collaborations we can form where we go, but compliance is something that stops everything in the way.
They don't really need to be blockchain familiar or tech savvy. They basically have the infrastructure. They are ready to be used.
Some people even wanted to tokenize their relationship.
I think it would be cool to tokenize something in the space, like if you talk.
Hi, Anastasia. Very honored to have you here today with us.
Hello, how are you, Harman?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Yeah, excellent. I am in Hong Kong right now. So beautiful afternoon. How about yourself?
Yeah, same. Juggling between weather mood swings here in India, I guess, right now. So currently I'm in North India, and earlier it was rain, now it's sunny. So juggling the moods just like regulators in crypto, I'll say. so,
Yeah.
so we have recorded 15 episodes till now, and you are our first guest from Hong Kong. So I'm really pleased to have you here. Welcome to What Are You Tokenizing? I'm sure that the audience is going to enjoy a lot from your conversation and your insights.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and thinking of me. And yeah, Hong Kong is definitely a growing space when it comes to digital assets, getting shaped up into a pretty advanced regulatory environment, I would say. So hopefully you'll have a lot more guests from Hong Kong. And yeah, until now, I'm happy that I'm representing this part of the world.
Amazing. No, I don't know if you know, just yesterday a news came. It's very fresh. It's the latest news that Hong Kong approved a stablecoin law. There's not a lot of information there. I'm still trying to understand that. That's why I didn't keep any questions related to that. But with that in place, with stablecoins and digital assets being regulated in Hong Kong now, finally, I think it's going to be an amazing place to talk to a lot of other people and get those insights from that corner of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the stablecoin bill passed, and also Hong Kong has been kind of gradually becoming a more established area for launching projects regarding related to real world assets, tokenizing securities, or launching any sort of like structured products that are regulated and offered to institutions. There's Bitcoin ETFs and so on. So I think the institutional sort of interest and demand has been very strong, and therefore kind of like the regulatory environment is following. And I would say the SFC, which is our local regulator, is one of the most experienced regulators with digital assets. So they've been in this space, I would say. I'm here for 6 years, so I think at least 4 or 5 years it's since they had been actively looking into the space, providing the licensed requirements, working on those white papers and establishments around the regulatory frameworks. So it's definitely grown, at least since I'm here. Um, and yeah, yesterday I went to the FinTech Week Association, the FinTech Association of Hong Kong, kind of like announcing the FinTech Week is going to happen in November, which
Yes.
usually happens once a year in November.
Yes.
And they had some panel discussions, and the main theme was stablecoins or AI, which is more
Wow.
important. And it was quite cool because they had the actual AI person on the screen, and the MC had the sort of live one-on-one interaction with the AI, and so it was quite cool, and it really validated sort of the I guess the presence of those two strong topics in Hong Kong. There is literally, well, I think AI not just in Hong Kong, like everywhere. I think this year everybody has been talking about
Yes.
AI,
Yeah.
but stablecoin and being kind of like an essential part of the payment integrations here in Hong Kong, I think that definitely validated the fact that it's all present here and happening.
Absolutely. This is a common thing that we have been hearing in the last all podcast sessions with people who are actually working in the space. They all consider stablecoin as the biggest example of RWA. Eventually, at the end of the day, it's your currency only converted into a digital asset, and it's from a core point of view, it's an RWA only. right? And I'm glad you brought up the the fintech event that you went to yesterday, because there is another line from an event that you attended. I saw it somewhere that when you attended Token 2049 this year, there is something that you mentioned that technology is no longer a barrier, but the structure and the collaborations are, right? I wanted to understand what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I think in terms of the technology, right? Like how you approach minting assets. So, like minting and tokenizing, I would kind of use these words interchangeably. So, you have an asset, let's say it's a property. You have some sort of proof of that property. Maybe you have a structure, which is an SPV, special purpose vehicle, which is essentially a company that owns those properties. There are certain, documents, papers that can prove that ownership. That's one way of tokenizing properties through tokenizing that entity and the equity in that entity, which is that SPV that holds a portfolio of these properties. Or in Dubai, recently, there's been a case of having the first pilot of tokenizing the actual deed of ownership of a
Yes.
particular property. And let's say, that legal part had been structured. Now, the way you mint assets or you tokenize the assets and bring them on chain would essentially happen through setting up a number of parameters and essentially getting that document that is proving the ownership and the parameters and the kind of like characteristics of the asset itself, and embedding those parameters into the token that is going to be minted on a specific chain. So let's say you're choosing layer 2 on Ethereum, for example, Base, and then you're choosing your token standard, be it ERC20. And then essentially, the actual process of tokenization really requires those documents and the parameters and the end wallet that is going to receive those minted assets. So that's why I'm saying that the infrastructure is there. There's various infrastructure providers for tokenization. Defactor had done it slightly differently, where we don't just sort of tokenize assets one by one for different clients. We kind of thought of creating one toolkit that is applicable to different RWA platforms, and essentially be it real estate, gold, wine, whatever their industry is, which obviously, we aren't trying to tokenize every single industry. We're trying to provide tech for other startups that are working with those assets. And so we developed the toolkit as such that they will be able to, use it, have access to it on an annual basis. And the toolkit does essentially three things. One is tokenizing the asset itself on those EVM chains with whatever standard that they are preferring. And then, secondly, launching a borrowing and lending decentralized application, which is a smart contract that essentially enables for that asset to be locked as a collateral and borrowed against in stable coins, which is a very interesting and needed feature in the real world asset market right now. And then thirdly, there's an Engage platform. Engage is essentially built for projects that have their own ecosystem token. So be it the utility token or governance token, essentially once they go TGE, token generation event, and they launch their own token, they might need staking or governance or vesting for that token, or having a buyback mechanism where the buyback happens, buying those tokens from the market, essentially engages that dashboard that provides all sort of transparency around the tokenomics. And that's why, like, after we have developed that sort of infrastructure that really just helps them kickstart and go from 0 to 1, I think like we are sort of qualified to say that the tech is there. The tech isn't the main pain point now, and it really hasn't been, I would say, the past year. Well, we've been delivering the toolkit for a little over a year to clients that had deployed it and had the users interact with it. But as they start using the tag, and as we speak to all of these potential partners and projects that are from these various asset class backgrounds, they essentially struggle with a lot of other different things, like how to structure properly, who would be their distribution partner, Who would be that broker dealer that is licensed to distribute their assets in those various jurisdictions? How should they properly onboard users and investors? So that's why I'm saying like tech is no longer the pain point. It's all the other counterparties that the project needs to find and validate and start building the relationships with.
Understood. No, definitely, I agree with you there. What I've seen as well in different markets is that technology remains a constant. It can be delivered. Yes, there are some hurdles in the technology part, but that's not related to the technology itself. It's related to the teams that are building it. That's what clients most focused on, people most focus on. I've seen a lot of people struggling with their platform development because they didn't choose the right team. Maybe that's another reason, but the technology itself is there, which can be used by a capable, competent developer to build something good. And the only hurdle that comes later on is integrating it with the legacy system, helping people understand how it actually works, and then the adoption part. So completely agree with you there. One thing that you mentioned in this conversation was the ERC20 standard, for as just an example that people might use. So I know that there is a good standard ETH 3643 that is being used for tokenization. Uh, do you feel like there has to be a standard, a common standard to enable RWA adoption, or it can exist with different standards? If I'm building something with ERC20 and you're building something with ERC 3643, it's okay, or should we be building on the same thing?
I think different token standards they facilitate tokenization in slightly different ways that, let's say, are tailored to the needs of the issuer and their particular investor audience. So I think the fact that they exist, it does make sense to provide at least a little bit of flexibility around how issuers are structuring their asset tokenization and implement it, and how they are implementing it. But I think to some extent it needs to be standardized to either a few standards or using some of the interoperability platforms like Layer Zero that essentially facilitate the connectivity between different blockchains and different standards, because there's so many of them now, and really it isn't easy, I think, to navigate through that for somebody who comes from Web 2. And for the real world asset as the industry itself, I mean, let's be honest, like it's primarily Web 2. So, sure, we have some of the projects that had now, become a Web 3 project, which is already tokenizing something and the whole platform. And, maybe their users are particularly Web 3 familiar and crypto native. But the fact that the assets are coming from the traditional asset industries, and the fact that crypto in general is still pretty much a fraction of the overall capital markets, I think we would not be, honest with ourselves if we didn't say that the potential for the real world assets is in that Web 2 world, and really bringing those people that have never interacted with blockchains, and maybe they haven't interacted with any tech and they had done everything very manually. I don't know, maybe they mine emeralds in Latin America, like literally mine them physically, right? So they maybe haven't had even a website, and the whole business has been pretty much Web 2 for years, and now they are slightly coming into Web 2.5, and building out a platform for the users to get onboarded and subscribe, and the next step would be to start delivering the asset in a tokenized form. They don't know what's ERC 3643, and do they need to know? I don't know. I think we need to simplify everything as much as possible.
This is a kind of insight that only someone with actual marketing background can share. I'm sure you are aware of this. Another biggest challenge in Web3 that is faced by projects and people alike is that you don't get to find the right experienced people in marketing. Usually, everyone just gets first into how can we get more crypto users. Let's create a community. Let's create a Telegram channel. Let's create a crypto Twitter campaign giveaway. Let's give away $100 to anyone who can post this. That's the normal stuff that's been happening, and it's circulating around the same set of users, the small number of users that are familiar with Web3 and blockchain, right? And that's why that option has been hindered for so long in those areas, right? What you said is I'll say the one of the best explanations, that Web2 users don't need to understand it. They have not even seen a website. They're Web0 user in essence. And to give them this access means that they will only come to this platform because they are getting something in return. They are getting a lot of value in return, and they will eventually come into it, right? So it's like you never drove any vehicle or a car, and when you saw, okay, this car can help me go from here to there faster and ways in a secure manner, you definitely want to drive a car. You learn how to drive a car afterwards, right? You don't get to know what the engine is or how it's working, but you drive it. So that I believe is an amazing thing. So I understand you have over a decade of experience in marketing and business development, right?
Yeah, yeah, primarily business development. That's what I've been focused on. But since I've worked mostly with very small teams, it's either been tech startups that I co-founded myself, or I've worked for someone sort of directly under the CEO, or at least, maybe in the beginning directly under head of sales. It's been rather smaller teams, so I've had to wear many hats. So I think it's been a range of you know different tasks between pre-sales, market validation, marketing itself, digital marketing, content writing, obviously pure business development and sales as well. And yeah, QA and testing and product work, that's also a business.
One
And
woman show, I'll say.
yeah.
Amazing, amazing. So this is the experience that have led you to understand the market right now. And what I wanted to understand was, so you have worked in all these spaces, right? So you know the ins and out of how industry has been moving forward. What are the trends that you have seen before RWA became mainstream? What are the trends that, let's say, you betted on or you wanted to be a part of, and then eventually you saw RWA? It's an amazing industry. It's going forward. It's changing the world, and then you got into it. But what were the trends before that?
I guess in terms of just my overall journey in the crypto space, it started when I was based in Taiwan, and it was very much Bitcoin related. So back in 2017, I was based there. I don't know if you're familiar with Taiwan, but they have producers of GPU cards, so the graphic cards that are needed for gaming primarily, but they're also quite useful for mining. And so some of my friends from Eastern Europe started to reach out to me to go find some GPU suppliers because they were building out mining farms. And me being working in the consumer tech and some VR and sustainable technology and things like that, I was very distant from the whole sort of like blockchain space at that time. So about 10 years ago, I guess, 7 years ago, maybe. And so at that time, I had looked into it. I understood, what's mining, why it's useful, what's Bitcoin, and so on. And by getting involved with those GPUs, I started to also just learn about the industry a lot more. So then I started to attend different blockchain events. Um, Taipei hosts the, what is it called, the Asia Blockchain Summit, all every year, I think. And since then, pretty much, I think I went to their second or third, maybe, ABS. And basically after that, London Blockchain Week and New York FinTech Week and so on. And I kept attending those events and just talking to the communities. And I figured that blockchain is becoming very prominent in the space, and people started to use the technology. And at that time, I think it was pretty much like a database management system. So like, you have spreadsheets and different other data management tools, and blockchain is kind of the one that's automating everything and making it transparent. And that was my understanding at that time, of why we need blockchain. It's not necessarily coming up with like an actual financial product. But when I started working in fintech, in like traditional fintech, for traditional financial institutions here in Hong Kong, I've discovered that actually blockchain is being used to work with a lot of financial instruments, and essentially it started to emerge as a whole industry, I think primarily pushed by some of the emerging markets and developing economies. Like originally I'm Russian, and people always ask me why in the whole crypto space there are so many Russians. And I think there might be different reasons, but my personal guess is that the country came out of the Soviet Union in the 90s. The currency has been, I don't know if it's the most volatile in the world, but it's been very volatile from ruble being, I mean, dollar being like 2 or 3 rubles end of the 90s, I think, like 98. And then beginning of 2000s and until like pretty much 2014, it's been around 33 rubles per dollar. And then the past 10 years, it's been around 100. And people had gone through a lot of domestic economical ups and downs, and what really defined the market and made financial analysts and traders strong was the FX trading. So if you think of crypto is basically FX trading because you trade pairs, right? It's the same as trading currency pairs. And so a lot of engineers and traders came out of that background and started working in crypto. So that's one of my guesses in terms of why some of the Russian speaking, experts are in the crypto space for so long. But basically, that is to say that these type of, trading, perpetual swaps, and things like that, that emerged from the financial markets and kind of like started to live on blockchain and started to be integrated with that new within that new community, that started to develop. And I think once blockchain started to be used for different financial instruments, that we kind of like slowly got into the RWA space, where obviously the biggest example is the treasuries and tokenization of fixed income products. That got the most adoption right now, but in my opinion, personally, it's not the most revolutionizing product because TradFi is going to become more agile and more transparent and faster, and move from T+3 to T+1, and it's great, good for them. But I think the fact that there's only like 10, 15 wallets interacting with that sort of tokenized fund, and products like Beetle, it's not really changing the world in my opinion. It's just making the traditional finance infrastructure a bit better, and settlements are getting faster and so on. But I think where tokenization really happens to be that driver for the new finance sort of is when we started to look broader at different assets, and starting with these financial instruments from the capital markets industry. Now people are slowly going into tokenizing properties, commodities, private credit, agricultural assets, and it's all around the world where that wasn't really a thing, and people didn't have access to, fixed income products, for example, and now they're benefiting from tokenizing, I don't know, yield from their farm.
Amazing. No, definitely. I don't share this quite often, but I also started my career with blockchain and money market and trade finance solutions. So I got an early start in terms of how institutions see blockchain. At that time, as you rightly mentioned, it was just 10, 15 wallets managing everything, and it didn't make a difference in the world. Yes, it made their life easier. It made it easier for them to trust and do faster transaction, but that was I'll say faster in terms of, rather than waiting for one day to transfer funds between banks, you transfer it within 1 second. That does make a difference, but not that big of a difference to the world, right? We would survive with one day as well, but maybe there are some other factors I don't know about, but that was my take on it. And so in this whole scenario, now, as you mentioned, private credit, real estate, agriculture, carbon credits, there are many other tokenization being done, financial bonds, other financial instruments, a lot of things being tokenized. Now, institutions have also moved from just a ledger, just using blockchain as a transactional store of data, to actual implementation, to ownership, to liquidity, and other areas. But in all this instance, with your experience in the institutional side, what do you think is the hardest factor or strongest factor when trying to get institutional investors on board with a tokenized, let's say, any financial instrument, let's say a bond?
The strongest factor to convince them? to get into tokenized assets, or
yes, to get them get them onboarded on the platform to, or either to convince them that they should do it.
I think compliance really, because as long as you are within the financial institution space, so like kind of institutional finance as opposed to retail, I think they all care about the mandate, the investment, the investment mandate, and basically staying within that requirement is key, because if you are dealing with something that is regulated and the regulated assets, you don't want to risk your reputation because you have LPs and you have a lot of responsibility with the regulator locally. So I would say compliance and being able to use the tech in such way that it facilitates all of those compliance requirements to be fulfilled. I think that's pretty much the main thing.
Amazing, amazing. Yep, that's again one of the most, I'll say, common denominator among all the RWA major projects in the world right now. As you started, that technology is there. Yes, structure and collaborations we can form where we go, but compliance is something that stops everything in the way. If that's clear, then it becomes easier for better adoption, and hopefully it will get clear with the new Hong Kong law and the new Genius Act in US. It's a good direction that's going on, but we can only be hopeful. So apart from this, Anastasia, I also got to know recently that Defactor, the company that you're currently leading in terms of growth, they announced a multi-million euro bond with the Swiss credit specialist. Can you share some insights on that? Like, what was the journey? How did it happen? And now what's the implications? What's the impact? And what can people learn from that?
Yeah, so I guess the case has been that it's a fund that's working with real estate. It's a multi-million dollar or euro rather nominated tokenized bond that is issued out of Luxembourg and distributed so far within the European Union, but now getting into the Dubai market or the MENA region. And yeah, we're working closely to see how to bring them to Asia as well. Um, and essentially, that's one of the cases where we had tokenized assets from the traditional asset market. So the client, they're pretty much from the traditional finance world or Web 2 world, and had used our infrastructure for essentially issuing these bonds on chain. I think that, I guess, like the biggest takeaway from that experience for us has been that um, for the institutions like this fund, like they don't really need to be blockchain familiar or tech savvy. They basically have the infrastructure. They are ready to be used by their team. What really is impressive, I think, from this experience is that they really showcased their capability of working very quick and very rapidly, kind of like getting their heads around the legal structure and how to do that properly with the tokenization in mind, because of course being regulated and having assets on chain sort of requires them to also put together, a number of documents and things that would essentially help them distribute the asset within. So let's say the Luxembourg Stock Exchange was, listing that asset there, and the fact that it's tokenized, it also required the team to be prepared to fulfill certain, documents, requirements, and essentially communicate to the local regulator that this is going to be done with the help of the blockchain technology essentially. And yeah, it's very impressive, the team being ready to do that and the team being so quick at executing such things. So that really just shows that, I would say, some of the particular jurisdictions, they're actually quite ready to just grab that technology and apply it to the current market.
Got it, got it. And I believe that what you just said in on these lines, the right person to convince these kind of asset managers or companies that they should adopt a platform of tokenization, those kind of people need to have the background that's required to convince. It's not just blockchain background, it's not just grade 5 background, but it's a mix of both that is required to have that kind of skill set in this area, right? So I'm hinting towards your recent interview where you shared that Web3 projects need hybrid thinkers fluent in TradeFi and blockchain. I think that was a Premio where you did this interview, and you mentioned this line. So what is that criteria you have when you see when you are looking to hire someone who can help you in such a scenario where they bring together two different areas of expertise and help convert such a big institutional player?
Yeah, it's a great question, and yeah, I've discussed that in quite a few podcasts. In terms of the talent, I think Web3 is a very unique space for sure. In terms of just the fact that we're all sort of, building the plane while we're flying it, kind of like it's a very new industry. Everybody's from various backgrounds. Most of people, I would say, like in the crypto space, had come from a traditional finance background because, again, there's a lot of parallels that you can draw from. Again, FX trading is basically trading crypto as well, very similar. Structured products, derivatives, but then at the same time, people that had worked with data infrastructure, maybe not even related to trading, again, can apply their skills in the blockchain space. So the overall crypto and RWA industry, they sort of combine different skill sets from traditional industries like finance and technology, and at the same time, if you've worked anywhere in the retail business and you've had very close interaction with consumers that are interacting with a particular app, let's say, something that really takes the user through an onboarding process. There's some decision making to be done, KYC and so on. I would say that type of person is also quite helpful within the team because essentially user experience and user education is something that is always going to be a problem with crypto. I think we keep complaining about the UX on all sorts of podcasts and panel discussions, and I don't think it's to go away that soon. At least for now, like I haven't seen that part to be improved drastically. So I think people that can contribute to a better user experience, user onboarding, education of users, really explaining to them and building that trust as well, because winning trust, I think that's been becoming harder and harder in this industry. And then so from that perspective, anybody who had worked with a particular tech product that had user experience and user interface, I think it's a very valuable asset to the team. And then people that are genuinely aware of some of the mechanics around the financial markets, or around the tech infrastructure and how to build obviously smart contracts. But I mean, I'm not so familiar with hiring developers. I used to, I've always used to working, I'm very used to working with the tech team in general, but I don't really hire them, if that makes sense. So from that perspective, I would say anybody who was able to, I guess, convert their skills from uh, JavaScript, C++, Python, those languages towards, started to build on, Rust and Solidity for smart contracts in the blockchain space. Those people, I think, had shown, the skills and the capabilities of being flexible and being sort of like forward thinking, agile, and essentially anybody who has been able to teach themselves, because again, this is a very new industry. Nobody had taught blockchain engineers for 20 years at universities. They all kind of came out of their own initiative to become a Solidity smart contract developer type of passion, So I think, yeah, staying flexible, staying curious, and being able to evolve very quickly in this sort of like ever growing space that didn't really have any instructions or anything, any sort of structure really around the industry for the past 10, 15 years. I think these are the people and the talent that can, essentially add value to any project.
Absolutely, I feel like that kind of the last ending of this whole conversation was more from a personal experience, because I know you started in 2017, I started in 2018, and at that time there were no resources, absolutely no resources. You couldn't find anything on YouTube, you couldn't find any blogs. If you did find any blogs, they were so technical, so into the consensus mechanism that you can't understand easily. You need to spend a lot of time. I remember buying a book and then going through it every night to at least understand what blockchain is initially. Although it seems easy to understand on a high level, but when you go deep into the details, there is so much more. So I definitely relate to that what you are saying. If you find that initiative in someone, then he or she becomes a good team member for taking this industry forward. Amazing. So, while we are hinting towards the end of this podcast, I've really enjoyed this conversation, Anastasia, and some amazing insights that I believe people will really benefit from building. From someone who's building in Hong Kong and who's been around the world, known different jurisdictions, how they are working around. One key question that I have in mind is just a curious question. I've seen many crazy assets being tokenized. Some things that you can't even fathom. Someone tokenizing, a wine barrel. Someone tokenizing different kind of watches. Someone tokenizing cashews and whatnot. Right. But what is that one asset that you would want to see tokenized on your toolkit? Wi- just a crazy idea out there.
Like a more exotic asset that would be just interesting to work with, or that one asset
Anything,
that I would
anything
like.
that you would want to convert.
Um, it's a difficult question because I think so. I've like I don't know some exotic assets obviously can come across our team, business development team, and I've had conversations about like tokenizing cannabis farm yield in Latin America, and giving people access to that yield. Like that sounded kind of crazy to me, but in that jurisdiction, growing cannabis was legal, so
Yes.
people started to build on those ideas. Would I want exotic assets and platforms that are working with like something very rare to be, using our toolkit? Sure, that only brings a lot more excitement into the industry, I think. But I wouldn't say, I guess that's my number one goal to find like the most special and exotic asset, because I really always think about the end user and the end market. And I think the biggest sort of like consumers of real world assets that are now being tokenized are essentially people that are buying the most common assets for now. So it's properties, it's some of the commodities, maybe some crops being tokenized, in the agricultural space, precious metals, super easy to understand. Gold has a global spot market price that is essentially very easy to check, the market that is very liquid. So these type of assets that are really well understood, and we've already implemented, deployed our toolkit for everything that I just mentioned, with at least one use case. But I would like to have more of those, because I think that's where the majority of the market is, and I think when they push that to become widely adopted, because if you're familiar with like the startup curve, we're kind of like within the, maybe we're like beyond the visionaries within the early adopters, but the early majority, the majority, they're kind of far from, they're still trying to understand, oh, why do I need to tokenize something to get access to that asset? Why don't I just go through the traditional way? There's still quite some, number of barriers for this market. So I would like to have at least, those most common basic assets, two, three, four of them, just wildly spread until we get into, you know, your gin and tonic tokenization type of stuff. So yeah, I think adoption of the most commonly understood assets for me is kind of key, and that's what I'm the most excited about.
Sure, but I will definitely get to know more about one particular example. So I'll give you an example. In previous podcast, someone wanted to tokenize the Eiffel Tower. Someone wanted to tokenize the whole Hong Kong city line. Someone wanted to tokenize a football club. So on those terms, what is that one crazy asset or idea you have that, okay, if this gets tokenized, I know I've succeeded?
Well, I mean, I think something, if we're talking about like really crazy things, I think it would be cool to tokenize something in the space. Like if you tokenize a star or, I don't know, Mars, and then people can basically have a kind of like almost a property ownership situation where you own, an acre on Mars, the planet. So that'd be pretty cool, I think. What you use it
Absolutely.
for?
I think it will also set the tone of a new civilization that people are hinting towards. If you are going to start new, then start it right. Don't start it with the limitations or the challenges that we are facing today. Start it with how 1,000 years ago people used to do with barter system. Right?
Mm.
Amazing. That definitely is a crazy but very
Well,
intriguing
let me
idea.
ask you then. I guess having talked to so many RWA projects, what do you think is like the most surprising use case that you've heard of so far that's been implemented?
Again, so that's a key part that's been implemented. There's a definitely different line altogether. Usually, uh, I come across a lot of RWA projects which have not been implemented. A lot of people try to tokenize. Some people even wanted to tokenize their relationship. Have other people bet on it, but it was not implemented. One thing that implemented that really got my attention was the private credit line. How it's different from normal real estate tokenization, how it's making a difference in terms of removing the legal issues, making it easier for people to trust and participate. Yields are better and easier to do, and then it's a very good mix of manual and digital process. So that was one idea that I really liked.
That's cool. Yeah, private credit is certainly a big one.
Yes. But otherwise, for me, the craziest idea is to tokenize more fan engagement. Coming from a country where people kind of like uh, they worship their celebrities in some areas. So I know that if I'm able to tokenize the assets of those celebrities, even the smallest of assets, even their toothbrush, I know that's going to be a big and amazing industry. So
I
that's
thought
my
you would be
crazy.
talking about a cricket fan club.
Yes, that also is there.
Yeah, that's actually a luxury industry. I think that's actually a fast growing area as well. I
Yes,
think like Lamborghinis and watches and so on. um, there's different, of course, issues around proving that the asset is not fake, and also while you're storing your tokens that represent that asset in your digital wallet, what actually happens to the actual asset. Let's say it's a watch, what if it gets modified or stolen and modified then replaced? So you really like need to have serious custody infrastructure for that, in my opinion, and just not just the wallet custody in our sort of Web3 understanding, but like real custody, which is like the actual vault or the actual company, audit company that holds those assets. So I think from that perspective, it could be a huge industry because it requires like some serious counterparties.
absolutely. I'm hoping that to be the case as well and thinking on those lines. But really glad to get your insights on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, thanks for asking such interesting questions. I'll have to keep thinking about the most exotic assets that I wish to deliver the toolkit for, and yeah, perhaps find something else for your next episode.
Do let me know if you found something really, really exotic and exciting. I would love to know about that.
Yeah, absolutely, and for sure, keep your eyes out for any announcements on Defactor's Twitter. We also just launched a project, sort of like as a founding member of RWA.io. That's essentially a data infrastructure and platform with, I think, over 300 projects having their page there, and so far I think 132 validated their page, which is free and pretty quick. So validation and verification happens to essentially bring more trust around the industry and around those assets that are being tokenized. So I would say, follow RWIO Twitter, Defactor as well, and just, watch over those projects that are getting launched, and again, going beyond the POC and actually implementing and deploying something. And I'm sure you'll have plenty of content for your upcoming episodes, because yeah, the space is growing and it's pretty crazy, I think. getting really,
Absolutely,
really
absolutely, Anastasia.
easy.
I'm more excited about that I can show, but definitely I agree with you there. And thank you so much for the time that you spared today for this call. Hopefully, a lot of good insights that were shared in this podcast, people will benefit from them, and will keep on pinging you for more such insights in the future.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks again for inviting me, and yeah, hope you find interesting content for your upcoming ones.
Thank you. Have a nice day, Anastasia.
You too.